Chapter 1. The Dinner Setup. Jordan sat on the edge of the bed, slowly adjusting the cuff of his tailored navy blazer. His fingers moved with calm precision, but his mind was elsewhere, already calculating outcomes. He could hear the soft clatter of heels from the hallway as Dana paced between the mirror and the closet, muttering under her breath. She appeared in the doorway, dressed in a sleek burgundy dress that hugged her in all the right places, her hair curled and pinned to corporate perfection. Her eyes, however, weren't admiring her own reflection. They were fixed squarely on him. "Jordan," she said sharply, "promise me you're not going to make this weird." He looked up at her, one brow raised. "This dinner means a lot," she continued, arms folding across her chest. "You know how important tonight is. The partners from Nextra, the CEO, my whole team, they're going to be there." "I know," Jordan replied mildly, smoothing out the lapels of his blazer. "You've reminded me 17 times. Dana exhaled sharply. "I just don't want any stunts or stories or your usual mysterious sarcasm. Just be normal. Smile. Shake hands. Compliment someone's ugly tie. Please." Jordan stood, walked over to her, and kissed her cheek lightly. "I'll behave," he murmured. "Scout's honor." She gave him a skeptical look. "You were never a scout." "True," he smirked, "but I've always known how to blend in." Dana didn't laugh. Instead, she grabbed her clutch off the dresser and made for the door. "Let's go. I don't want to be late." Jordan glanced down at his watch as he followed her, an elegant, vintage Omega he never wore unless the night promised to be interesting. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth as the second hand ticked smoothly forward. Timing is everything. The hotel was exactly what he expected: opulent, self-important, and painfully sterile. A gold-plated sign near the lobby's marble elevator read, "Nextra Quarterly Dinner, Rooftop Ballroom." Dana was already in her element as they stepped off the elevator. She greeted everyone with a dazzling smile, switching from small talk to industry jargon with the ease of someone who had practiced it in front of the mirror. Jordan followed silently, hands in his pockets, his expression neutral. The ballroom doors opened into a sleek modern space bathed in warm golden light. Champagne towers glistened in the corners. A jazz quartet played something forgettable near the stage. Every table was white linen pristine, and every face wore a mask of polished charm. It was a room full of ambition, expensive suits, confident postures, smug laughs. The smell of power and desperation hung in the air like a designer cologne. As Dana led him toward her table near the center of the room, Jordan caught a dozen eyes flick toward him. He wasn't unknown, but he wasn't known either. To them, he was just Dana's husband. The accessory. "Jordan, this is Michelle. She's the lead PM on our R&D division," Dana said, guiding him into introductions. "And this is Ray from corporate finance. Oh, and that's Paul from legal." Each of them smiled, shook his hand, said polite nothings. Michelle's smile was too sharp. Ray's handshake too firm. Paul barely made eye contact. "You don't talk much, do you?" Michelle asked with a wink. "I find people more interesting when I let them do the talking," Jordan replied smoothly, sipping from his glass. She blinked, unsure whether to laugh or be offended. Dana cut in. "He's just quiet, always observing." Her voice had an edge. "He's a good listener." "I bet he is," Ray chuckled. Jordan said nothing. He just scanned the room with the ease of a man who had read every line of the play before the curtain had even risen. In the far corner, he noticed the CEO, Arthur Langston, distinguished, mid-60s, silver hair slicked back, deep laugh lines around his mouth, holding court at a private table with a few upper-level execs. He was the kind of man who only laughed when others weren't in on the joke. Jordan's eyes narrowed for the briefest second. He knew that laugh. It wasn't joy, it was ownership. "Come on," Dana said, nudging him. "Let's grab our seats." The first course is about to be served. Their table was surrounded by her department, marketing, finance, strategy heads. People who knew the power structure like religion. People who could smell status the way wolves smell blood. Jordan pulled out Dana's chair for her. A few of the coworkers chuckled like they'd just seen a magic trick. "He's old school," Dana said quickly, brushing it off. "Chivalry and all." Across the table, A guy in his early 30s, well-groomed but smirking like he was always one joke ahead, leaned forward. Travis. Jordan clocked him immediately. The kind of guy who wore designer watches on payment plans and dropped crypto terms to sound impressive at brunch. So you're Dana's man, huh? Travis said, grinning. Jordan raised a brow. That's what the marriage certificate says. Travis laughed like he'd been waiting to pounce. Man, must be nice. Staying home, sipping coffee, watching your wife run with the wolves. Dana coughed into her glass. Jordan smiled. It has its perks. Do you even work? Travis pushed. Or you like, retired early. Dana cut in. Travis, I'm just saying. Travis shrugged, grinning wider. No hate. It's just rare these days to see a man so comfortable letting the woman wear the pants. You're really redefining masculinity, bro. A few chuckles around the table. Jordan leaned back slightly in his chair, gaze fixed on Travis, not hostile, just assessing. You know, Jordan said, voice smooth as velvet. Some people build empires in silence. Others just talk loud and hope someone mistakes it for success. Travis blinked, caught off guard. Jordan smiled and lifted his glass. Cheers to pants, then. Even Michelle snorted at that. Dana shot Jordan a warning glance, but said nothing. She turned her attention to her menu as the first course was served, something complicated with goat cheese and a French name no one could pronounce. Jordan said nothing else. He didn't need to. He was already playing a different game. As the server cleared their table and the wine refills began, Jordan glanced at his watch again. The second hand clicked forward. Timing is everything. Chapter 2. The Mockery. The scent of roasted lamb and truffle risotto filled the ballroom as the waitstaff moved in coordinated silence, delivering entrees to every white linen table. Wine glasses clinked. Polished silverware shimmered under the chandeliers. Laughter rolled from one end of the room to the other, bouncing off the marble columns like a ripple of smug satisfaction. Jordan sat quietly at his end of the table, idly spinning the stem of his wine glass between two fingers. His eyes flicked across the room, absorbing, mapping. Every table had its own rhythm, its own hierarchy. He watched how they leaned in to talk, who interrupted who glanced toward the CEO's table too often. Everyone here was performing. Everyone except him. Across from him, Dana laughed too loudly at something Michelle said, probably another mild office anecdote delivered with theatrical flair. She leaned in just a little more toward her co-workers than she did toward her husband. Jordan noticed, but didn't blink. He didn't need attention. He didn't come for it. He came for the long game. And then came Travis. So, Travis said, dropping his knife with a clatter on his empty plate and wiping his mouth dramatically with a napkin. Jordan, my man, I gotta ask. Jordan turned his head slowly, brows lifted just slightly calm polite. Travis grinned like a man who thought he was charming. What's it like being the trophy husband? Jordan tilted his head. I'm sorry. You know, Travis chuckled, waving his fork in the air. Like Dana's the big boss. The breadwinner. You just kick back, hit the gym, maybe hit the spa. A few soft laughs trickled around the table. Michelle tried to smother a smile behind her napkin. Ray from finance snorted into his glass. Even Dana let out an awkward giggle before raising her champagne to her lips, hiding behind it like a shield. Jordan's eyes flicked to her for the briefest second. That was all he needed to know. He returned his gaze to Travis. The smirk was still plastered across the man's face, but his eyes were searching now, trying to gauge how far he could push. Jordan didn't flinch. He took a slow sip of wine, then set the glass down with precision. It's peaceful, he said calmly. Travis blinked. Peaceful? Jordan smiled faintly, not needing validation, not confusing noise for significance. That kind of peace. There was a beat of silence. Michelle looked between them. Dana stiffened just slightly. But Travis wasn't done. The kind of man who didn't know when to stop, who mistook silence for submission. He leaned forward on his elbows, voice louder now. Half for the table, half for himself. Come on, man. I'm just saying, most guys I know would go nuts sitting at home while their wife runs board meetings. I mean, no offense, he added, not meaning it at all. But doesn't it sting a little? You ever get tired of being a kept man? There it was. Jordan's jaw didn't tighten. His expression didn't shift. But something in the room changed. An unseen thread pulled taut. Dana gave a nervous laugh, eyes darting between them. Travis raised both hands, smirking. I'm joking. Come on, don't go all HR on me. The others chuckled again, but it was thinner now. Uneasy, like they just realized the air had changed but couldn't tell why. Jordan sat back in his chair slowly, fingers steepled under his chin. He looked at Travis like one might look at a curious insect, amused, detached. Then he spoke, his voice calm as ever. Are you done? The words cut through the table like a blade made of ice. Travis opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His smirk faltered for a second. Jordan didn't blink, didn't break eye contact, just leaned back, lifted his glass again, and sipped as if he hadn't just slit the man's ego wide open. Michelle cleared her throat, eyes darting to her plate. Ray swirled his wine and pretended to read the label. Dana sat frozen, mouth slightly open, her face a mask of confusion and embarrassment. But Jordan? Jordan didn't even look ruffled. He was just getting started. Chapter 3. The bomb drop. The laughter hadn't even settled when the energy at the table shifted. Jordan could feel it before it happened, like a change in air pressure before a storm. That fake warmth of polite office chatter suddenly grew tighter, more alert, like a classroom moments before the principal walks in. From behind him, there was a booming chuckle that didn't match the others, a voice with weight behind it. Jordan didn't need to turn to know who it was. Arthur Langston, CEO of Nexra, arrived at the table like a politician arriving late to a fundraiser he didn't want to be at, but had to own anyway. Dressed in a charcoal-tailored suit, with silver-gray hair perfectly combed back, he wore a practiced smile and the quiet arrogance of a man who'd been clapped into rooms for the last 3 decades. Well, Arthur said jovially, placing a hand on Travis's shoulder like they were old friends. What's all the laughing about over here? Someone finally put Travis in his place. Travis beamed. Nah, just messing with Dana's husband here. This guy's got the patience of a monk. He could take a joke. Dana laughed too quickly. It's nothing, Mr. Langston. Just some harmless teasing. Arthur looked at Jordan, then offered a hand. You must be Jordan, the famous man of mystery. Heard a lot about you. Jordan shook his hand. Firm grip. Eyes steady. I hope not too much, Jordan said smoothly. Arthur grinned. Only good things. Dana always speaks highly of you. His tone implied otherwise, like it was a polite obligation, not admiration. Jordan smiled mildly and said nothing. The table quieted slightly. Conversation stalled. Wine was sipped. Dishes pushed half-heartedly around plates. The earlier mocking tone had cooled, replaced by a cautious buzz of uncertainty. Arthur pulled up a chair and sat next to Travis, motioning for a waiter to bring him another glass of red. The man was used to being the center of gravity in any room, and he assumed everyone orbited him. So, Jordan, Arthur said after taking a sip, what is it you do these days? Still, relaxing. A couple heads turned, barely hiding their amusement. Jordan set down his wine glass gently. He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached for his napkin, wiped the corners of his mouth with meticulous care, and laid it neatly beside his plate. Then he turned toward Arthur, as if they were the only 2 people in the room. His voice was calm, controlled, the kind of voice that doesn't need to raise itself to cut through everything. How does it feel, Jordan began, to know the loser you're laughing at owns 90% of your company? It was like someone hit pause on reality. Fork stopped midair. Laughter died in throats. Travis blinked once. Then again. His face froze like someone had slapped him with an ice cube. Arthur's wine glass, caught halfway to his lips, trembled slightly. He sat down too quickly. A half-full glass nearby, one someone else had just picked up, slipped from their fingers and shattered on the ballroom floor. The sharp crash echoed across the room. Heads turned. Nobody at their table moved. Dana's hand jerked instinctively toward her wine. Her lips parted. Her throat bobbed, but no words came out. Arthur leaned forward slightly, confusion creasing his face. Excuse me. Jordan turned toward him fully now. His chair creaked softly as he adjusted his posture. No longer passive, no longer a +1. 90%, Jordan repeated, voice even smoother. Ownership, shares, control, call it what you want. Arthur looked like he'd just been told his house was built on a sinkhole. I don't understand, he said finally, almost laughing, as if trying to turn this into a misunderstanding. This is a joke, right? Jordan's smile didn't change. No, but I hear I'm good at taking those. Travis let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a scoff and a choking noise. That's not possible. You're just a kept man, Jordan offered, his eyes flicking toward him with surgical precision. Just a house husband? A background prop at your corporate dinner party. Travis swallowed hard. His face was red now, visibly sweating. Arthur leaned back in his chair like the weight of what he'd just heard was starting to sink through the denial. He looked toward Dana. Is this true? He asked her, voice lower now. Dana looked like she'd been dropped into cold water. Her lipstick had faded. Her hand trembled slightly on her napkin. Jordan, she whispered. What are you talking about? Jordan stood. The movement itself seemed to change the air pressure in the room. He wasn't just someone standing up, he was someone rising. He finished the last sip of his wine, set the glass down with quiet precision, and buttoned his jacket with the calm composure of a man who'd just won a war without raising his voice. He looked around the table, at the smirking faces that were now ghostly pale, at the confident coworkers now stiff and blinking like deer in headlights, at his wife, who sat frozen in place, her champagne glass still lifted halfway toward her lips, untouched. Then, with a cool finality, he said, You all should have done your homework. Chapter 4. The Walkout. Silence. Pure, heavy silence followed Jordan's final words like a dark cloud swallowing the air. You all should have done your homework. Not a single fork moved. Not a breath was taken. Around him, the illusion of superiority shattered. The proud laughs, the confident posturing, the passive snickering gone. Their masks were slipping, and he didn't need to say another word. Jordan didn't wait for responses, clarifications, or backpedals. He simply turned away. The ballroom doors were only a few steps from their table, yet every stride he took stretched like a declaration. Calm, composed, shoulders back, head high. He walked not like a man escaping embarrassment, but like a man exiting a room too small for him. He passed waiters frozen mid-step, glasses trembling in their hands. He passed junior execs whispering urgently, darting glances between him and the CEO. Even the jazz band faltered, one awkward trumpet note sliding off key before they cut the music entirely. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. Not until he heard the unmistakable clack of heels echoing behind him in frantic staccato. Jordan, Dana's voice, sharp and high-pitched, sliced through the tension behind him. Jordan, wait. He paused just outside the ballroom, under the crystal archway of the rooftop foyer. Behind him, the golden lights of the gala spilled out like a stage set left behind. The hotel's rooftop terrace lay ahead, dark, cool, moonlit, quiet. He didn't turn until she reached him. Dana was breathless, cheeks flushed, not from the wine, but from panic. Her clutch was barely zipped. Her heels, red and overpriced, wobbled slightly on the marble tile. Her earrings were swaying like they, too, were trying to catch up. What the hell was that? She demanded, breath ragged. What are you talking about? Jordan finally turned to face her. His eyes weren't angry. That was the part that made her stomach turn. There was no heat, no rage, no eruption. Just cold clarity. A chilling calmness that unnerved her more than if he'd screamed. You want the short version? He asked, hands in his pockets. Yes, she snapped. Please, because I just watched you nuke my company dinner like a madman in a movie. What the hell are you talking about? Jordan exhaled once, slowly, then nodded toward the stars above them, as if aligning himself with the vastness of everything beyond this nonsense. I saved your little company from collapse 3 years ago, he said flatly. I merged it with my firm, Orion Systems. I own everything. Dana's face slackened. What? He stepped closer, not threatening, just enough to make sure she heard every syllable. Nectar was going bankrupt, he said, drowning. The board didn't tell the employees because they didn't want to panic. They were on the verge of selling everything for scraps. That's when Orion stepped in, quietly, through a blind trust. I arranged a merger, took on their liabilities, rewrote their tech strategy from the shadows, and gave them the funding they needed to stay afloat. Dana took a shaky step back. No, that can't be. That's not possible. I would have known. Jordan's smile was thin. Would you? I work in upper marketing, she said, clinging to that truth like a life raft. I sit in quarterly meetings with the CFO. No one ever mentioned Orion. No, he agreed. They wouldn't, because the agreement was structured through shell entities and legal walls so thick that even Nextra's board couldn't see who owned what without legal clearance. But your CEO knew. Arthur signed the papers. I have the documents. Dana stared at him like she just realized she never really knew him. You've been hiding this? She whispered. I wasn't hiding anything, he said. I just didn't advertise it. I didn't need the applause. I didn't need the spotlight. I thought, his voice trailed, then firmed again. I thought I'd just help. Quietly. Let you shine in your field. Let you grow. Dana shook her head, blinking rapidly, as if trying to wake up from a bad dream. This doesn't make sense. You don't even, Jordan, you're not even on LinkedIn. That made him laugh, dry and sharp. You think power is measured in LinkedIn endorsements? She didn't respond. Her mouth opened again, but no words came. Her hands trembled slightly as they clutched her clutch bag, white-knuckled now. The same hands that hours ago adjusted her necklace before they walked in. The same hands that gestured toward him when she said, just be normal tonight. He took one final step toward her, closer, eyes locked. You sat at the head table, Jordan said, voice low but deliberate. Laughed with them. Let them mock me. You didn't say a word. You didn't defend me. You joined in. Dana blinked. I didn't mean to. You didn't even recognize the king of your kingdom. And with that, he turned again, his back to her, his footsteps echoing off the marble floor as he walked out into the night air of the rooftop terrace, leaving Dana standing there in silence, heels wobbling, heart pounding, and her entire reality cracking around her. Chapter 5. Receipts. The drive home was suffocating. Dana sat in the passenger's seat, arms tightly crossed, staring out the window as the lights of the city blurred past. Her heels were off, tossed into the footwell, her once perfect curls now falling limp around her shoulders. She didn't speak. Neither did Jordan. But unlike Dana, Jordan wasn't silent because he didn't know what to say. He was silent because he had already said enough. By the time they reached the driveway of their upscale suburban home, she was vibrating with questions, with disbelief, with the raw unease that came from realizing you'd been living in a story you didn't understand, let alone write. The garage door rolled open smoothly, revealing Jordan's side of the garage, neat, minimalist. His motorcycle stood in the corner under a black cover, untouched for months. The Tesla powered down with a soft hum. He stepped out first, unhurried, and made his way inside. Dana followed behind, barefoot, still in her burgundy dress, her clutch clamped under her arm like a security blanket. Jordan, she said as soon as the door clicked shut behind them. Talk to me. He didn't answer. He moved past her, through the sleek hallway, into the office tucked behind the library shelves. She followed close, confused. Jordan, are you serious about what you said at the dinner? You weren't just trying to make a scene, were you? He flicked on the office light. The room was clinical, black wood, cool gray walls, and a single L-shaped desk with dual monitors that hadn't been turned on in weeks. The space felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone sharper. Someone secretive. Dana lingered at the doorway, watching as Jordan walked calmly to the far corner and bent down in front of the steel cabinet bolted into the floor. He turned the dial of a fireproof case. A heavy click echoed through the office. Then another. Dana's eyes followed every movement, her arms wrapping tighter around herself. Wait, what is that? She asked. Jordan didn't reply. He opened the case, reached inside, and pulled out a sleek black folder. Thick, dense, labeled Orion Systems Holdings Private. He placed it on the desk without a word, opened it, and began to lay out the documents like cards in a game he'd already won. One after another. Signed merger contracts, transfer agreements, shell company registries, confidential memos between Nextra's former board and an anonymous capital partner, acquisition notices, ownership statements, trust documents. Dana stepped forward slowly, staring down at the paperwork. What is all this? Receipts, he said simply. Proof. She flipped through the top page. And the next. And the next. Every page had her company's name on it. Nexra. And every legal line pointed towards something she never knew existed. At the bottom of several documents, there was a familiar signature. His. She looked up at him, mouth slightly open. These are real? Jordan nodded. Every one. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned another page. This says, Orion Systems absorbed Nexra's debts and provided a liquidity injection through a silent merger agreement. That's correct. This happened before I even got promoted to senior marketing strategist. Exactly 3 weeks before, he said, eyes steady. That promotion was possible because your department survived the restructure I designed. Without Orion, your whole division would have been gutted. Dana sank into the leather chair opposite the desk, the folder in her lap like it weighed 100 pounds. You saved Nexra, she whispered. Yes, and no one ever told us. No one was supposed to, he said, sitting across from her. The deal was sealed behind a blind trust and a network of shell firms I personally engineered. The board knew. The C-suite knew. But for everyone else, it was as if Nexra had just gotten lucky during its worst fiscal year. Dana stared at the papers again, eyes darting over the legal language she barely understood. You planned this, she said softly. Yes. She looked up. What? He leaned back in the chair, folding his hands in front of him. His voice was lower now, thoughtful, controlled. I started Orion in college. In my dorm. Just a kid coding back-end systems for small banks and startup agencies. By the time I was 26, I had 3 international subsidiaries, a dozen patents, and 2 offers to sell for 9 figures. I turned them down. Dana blinked. Wait, what? Jordan nodded. I've been a silent billionaire for over 5 years. She looked like she'd been punched in the chest. Then why? Why did you? She stopped herself. Why didn't you ever tell me? I didn't want you to love the empire, he said softly. I wanted you to love the man behind it. Her lips parted, but no words came. He stood slowly and walked to the bookshelf behind the desk, pulled out a single black binder, thinner than the others. Here, he said, handing it to her. She opened it. Inside were notes, printouts, screenshots, emails, graphs, financial analysis. All of it was about Nexra. Jordan pointed to a graph on the second page. This was the projection 2 weeks before they called me. They were done, dead in the water. Then this, he flipped the page. That is what I gave them. Not just funding, direction, strategy, vision. I built them a path and let someone else walk it. Dana looked up at him, shaking her head slowly, her voice a whisper now. Why didn't you ever take credit? Because it wasn't about credit, Jordan said. It was about letting you rise. You were so proud of your work. I wanted you to be. I didn't want to be the shadow behind your spotlight. She clutched the folder tighter, chest rising and falling rapidly. But I laughed at you. Tonight. I let them, I know. Her mouth moved, but the words wouldn't come. A long silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. She looked down at the folder again, then slowly back up at him. You're the owner of Nexra. I'm the architect, he corrected quietly. The owner was always just a title. Chapter 6. Consequences begin. The house was silent. Too silent. Dana had gone upstairs hours ago, quietly, almost in a trance. Jordan remained downstairs, in the office, where the dim desk lamp cast long shadows across the room. The same papers from earlier were still spread across the desk, but now they were flanked by a MacBook, a burner phone, and a worn leather notepad filled with precise, angular handwriting. Jordan sat in the executive chair calm, focused, the kind of focus that only came from being underestimated one too many times. He took a long sip from a crystal tumbler of Macallan, then placed it down without taking his eyes off the phone screen. Midnight ticked closer. He tapped in a number. Not a contact, not saved. Memorized. 1 ring. 2. A groggy voice answered. Yeah, the voice said, slightly irritated, slightly alert. It's Jordan. That was all it took. The irritation vanished instantly. Sir, the man said, voice now sharp. Awake. It's been a while. What do you need? I need a full forensic audit. There was a pause on the line. Of what exactly? Nextra, Jordan said flatly. Effective immediately. Pull everything. Every salary disbursement, every bonus, every reimbursement, every vendor, every hush fund, every unclaimed share, every asset moved without record. I want all names attached to every transaction that's touched the books in the last 3 years. The man whistled low. This is about what happened tonight, isn't it? Jordan didn't answer that. He didn't need to. I assume we're not using your name directly? The man asked, already moving to his computer on the other end of the line. Correct. Route everything through Orion's third-tier compliance branch. Use the shell in Singapore for the cross-reference triangulation. Copy that. I'll loop in Celia from compliance and Patrick from legal. I want preliminary results before the emergency board meeting. The man hesitated. Board meeting? Jordan opened his laptop and pulled up his private email server, typing with quiet precision. Yes, I'm calling one. Emergency status. By shareholder right. When? Tomorrow, 9 a.m. You think that's enough time to catch them off guard? Jordan smirked. They're already off guard. They just don't know it yet. The man chuckled. Understood. I'll have a data team pull an all-nighter. You want them to prioritize anything specific. Start with Travis Denner. Ah, the voice said knowingly. The mouthy one? Jordan's eyes hardened. He called me a trophy husband. Mocked me in front of the entire senior staff. I want to know what skeletons he's hiding. Roger that. I'll dig into his company credit card statements and flag reimbursements. I've got an intern who's vicious with spreadsheets. Good, Jordan said. Also check Dana's departmental budgets. Another pause. Are you thinking she's involved in? No, Jordan said quickly. I don't think she is, but I want to know who around her is. If anyone used her name to funnel something past finance, I want their head. Understood. Jordan leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling, breathing slowly, letting the stillness guide his thoughts. Then, almost as an afterthought, and scanned for irregular contracts, consultant payments, temporary hires with unusually large payouts, startups they might be laundering through. The man let out a soft laugh. Sir, this feels less like an audit and more like a declaration of war. Jordan finally smiled. They laughed at the owner of the company in his presence. Let's see how funny they are tomorrow. The man was silent for a moment. Then he said, with admiration, It's going to be a massacre. I'm not aiming to massacre, Jordan said evenly. Just a cleanse. He ended the call without another word. Silence returned to the room. Jordan sat still for a long moment, letting the weight of what was coming settle over him, not with dread, but with resolve. This wasn't about pride anymore. It wasn't about ego. It was about consequence, about respect. He picked up the glass again and swirled the amber liquid. The room smelled like power and wood polish and quiet vengeance. He took a final sip, stood, and walked over to the large whiteboard on the wall. With a black marker, he wrote in large, block letters at the top. Nextra, operation. Clean house beneath it, he drew 3 boxes. 1. Travis Denner 2. CEO, Arthur Gaines 3. C-Suite Compliance Network, he drew arrows. Dates. Names. A line connecting Dana's department to Arthur's budget reallocations. A dotted circle around the quarterly reports that had shown record growth, but had no clear revenue trail to explain it. Falsified projections, Jordan muttered to himself. Artificial inflation. Possibly stock manipulation. He stepped back and looked at the board. Tomorrow would be explosive. He would walk into that boardroom not as the man they thought they mocked, but as the hand that signed their paychecks. As the ghost behind their rise. The god of their system. And he would burn down every inch of rot they built in his absence. Jordan capped the marker, walked back to his desk, and sent one final email to his corporate liaison. Subject: Emergency Board Session, Shareholder Mandate Time. 9 o'clock a.m. Location. Nextra HQ, Executive Floor, Conference Room, A Purpose. Internal Audit Review. Restructure Discussion. Attendance. Mandatory. Authority. Shareholder Majority. Legal Counsel. Present. Regards, J. M. Cross. Silent Majority Holder, Orion Systems Holdings. He hit send, then leaned back in the chair. Behind him, upstairs, Dana was still awake. She stared at the ceiling too, hearing none of this, still reeling from the weight of what she'd seen hours earlier, wondering who her husband really was. Jordan closed his laptop, exhaled, and stood. This kingdom was his, and the court was about to kneel. Chapter 7. The Purge. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Jordan stepped out first. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, midnight black tie, cufflinks shaped like phoenix wings, and an expression carved from stone. On his left was his lead counsel, Celia Hart, a silver-haired woman in her 50s with a piercing gaze and a folder tucked tightly under her arm. On his right, his executive assistant, Ronan, tall, silent, and wired in like a special forces operator with a tablet and Bluetooth earpiece. They strode across the polished marble floor of Nexra's executive level like a blade slicing through silence. Employees parted like the Red Sea. Someone whispered, "Is that the guy from the dinner?" Someone else whispered, "That's Dana's husband." They walked past glass offices filled with stunned faces. Whispers turned into frantic texts. Executives peered through blinds. By the time Jordan pushed open the doors to conference room, a dozen board members and department heads were already seated, fidgeting, murmuring, waiting. Arthur Gaines, the CEO, stood at the head of the table, adjusting his cufflinks and trying to mask the nervous tremble in his jaw. Dana sat near the far corner, still, pale, her hands in her lap. She looked like she hadn't slept. Jordan didn't look at her. He walked to the head of the table without hesitation and stood directly across from Arthur. "I called this emergency session under shareholder authority," Jordan said smoothly, eyes scanning the room. Arthur cleared his throat, trying to reassert his footing. "Mr. Cross, I understand you've had concerns, but there's a process." Jordan raised one finger. Arthur froze. "You had your chance," Jordan said, voice low but commanding. "You chose mockery over merit. You laughed when you should have listened. And now, Arthur," he leaned forward just slightly, locking eyes with him, "you're fired. Pack your ego with your things." Gasps echoed. A few hands clutched armrests. Arthur blinked, face flushed crimson, then white. "You can't. You don't have, though I have majority shareholder control through Orion Systems Holdings. I hold 90% of your company's structure via silent merger clauses and cross-shell acquisitions, which you were either too lazy or too arrogant to detect." Celia stepped forward, producing the folder and sliding it across the table. "Confirmed and filed with federal regulatory offices. Effective immediately. Signed by your own legal department last fiscal quarter," she added coolly. Arthur reached for the folder with shaking hands. The room was so quiet. The scratch of paper against the wood echoed like thunder. He started, then stopped. He looked around. No one met his gaze. Security entered the room. Jordan nodded once toward them. "Escort Mr. Gaines from the premises. Collect his badge. Disable his access." Arthur opened his mouth to protest again, but Ronan tapped his earpiece, already issuing instructions to IT. The CEO of Nexra, former CEO, was still mid-stammer when two suited security officers gently but firmly lifted him from a chair. "Don't touch me. This is illegal. I'll sue." "You signed your name to your own exit," Jordan said without flinching. "You just didn't read the fine print." The glass doors closed behind Arthur's stunned, stumbling figure. Silence reigned. Then Jordan turned slowly. His eyes landed on Travis Denner, who had slouched lower in his seat. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. "Mr. Denner," Jordan said, almost pleasantly, "would you like to explain these?" He turned to Ronan, who tapped his tablet. The massive monitor at the end of the room flickered to life. Dozens of emails splashed onto the screen. Messages with crude jokes, inappropriate comments, obvious favoritism, and unethical hiring practices. Gasped again. Dana inhaled sharply. "Let's walk through a few," Jordan continued. "Shall we?" He read aloud, voice like a scalpel. "She's hot, but dumb. I'll make her lead if she brings me coffee every morning." Jordan? The loser husband? LOL, she married down hard. "Let's get my cousin the marketing gig. Don't worry, I'll pad his resume." Travis stood, stammering. I was joking. Those were private. HR doesn't find them funny," Jordan cut in. "Neither does legal." And neither do the interns who filed complaints that were conveniently buried under your private network folder, also now in my possession. Ronan tapped his screen again. A new folder opened. Scan complaint forms. Names. Signatures. Wait, let's talk about this. Travis tried to force a chuckle. This doesn't have to get ugly. It already is, Jordan said flatly. He turned to the security team, who had returned. Escort Mr. Denner. Permanently. No, and oh, Dana, say something. Travis turned to her, desperate. Dana flinched, but said nothing. Security grabbed him by the elbows. Travis shouted as he was dragged out. This is a joke. You can't do this. I'm too important to. The doors slammed behind him. Jordan slowly turned back to the room. Now then, he said smoothly. Let's continue. Celia stepped forward, distributing copies of thick packet. In the past 24 hours, our team uncovered a disturbing pattern of misappropriated funds, side ventures disguised as vendor payments, hush money buried in consultancy agreements, and internal promotions based solely on favoritism and blackmail. More faces went pale. Jordan walked slowly behind the seated executives as Celia spoke. He paused behind each one for a moment, letting them sweat. Names? One of the board members croaked. Jordan didn't answer. Ronan did. Every name is in the folder, and so is your chance to resign voluntarily. Chairs scraped as people began scanning the documents. One woman burst into tears. A man swore under his breath. Another stood and simply walked out, leaving his badge on the table. Jordan finally took his seat at the head of the table, where Arthur once sat. His fingers drummed lightly. He said nothing for a long while, letting the shame soak the room like oil waiting for a match. At last, his eyes drifted just slightly to the corner of the room. Dana sat, hands clenched, watching her world collapse. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just stared at the man she thought she knew, now wielding power like a blade. And Jordan? He didn't look at her again. Chapter 8. The Rise of Merit. It was barely sunrise the next morning when Jordan stepped out of the private elevator and entered the executive floor of Nextra. He didn't need a grand entrance this time. The storm had already passed. Now it was time to rebuild on his terms. Ronan was already waiting near the boardroom, phone pressed to his ear, nodding efficiently as Jordan approached. Legal cleanups moving fast. 3 resignations came in overnight, Ronan reported. Another 5 are drafting theirs this morning. Jordan gave a small nod, already reviewing the email draft on his phone. Make sure their golden parachutes are shredded. No handouts for corruption. Already done, Ronan replied. As they walked into the boardroom, a different kind of energy hummed in the air. Nervous excitement. Quiet hope. The room wasn't filled with the usual suits and smirking execs anymore. Instead, a collection of mid-tier employees sat awkwardly around the table. Team leads, engineers, junior VPs, people who rarely got this close to power. Jordan moved to the head of the table. This won't take long, he began, setting his phone down. We're restructuring, and I'm not talking about budget cuts or new slogans. I'm talking about rebuilding Nextra from the marrow. He gestured to a petite woman seated 3 chairs down. Margaret Wu, he said. Margaret straightened in her seat, startled. Jordan continued. You wrote a proposal 6 months ago outlining how to reduce system lag by 40%. It was buried, ignored. What? Margaret blinked. Travis said it wasn't a priority and redirected me to revamp a PowerPoint for a client pitch. Jordan smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. He's gone. You're not. She sat up straighter. You built a prototype on your own time. I saw the code. He turned to the room. Margaret Wu is the new CEO of Nextra Technologies. Gasps. Someone dropped their coffee cup. Margaret's mouth parted, speechless. "Me, you earned it," Jordan said simply. A stunned silence followed, broken only by a few murmurs of disbelief. Margaret looked around the room, tears welling in her eyes, but not falling. I don't even know what to say. Good, Jordan said. Talk less. Build more. Ronan will forward onboarding details. Celia will handle the legal filings. He turned to the rest of the room. Now, the days of flashy titles and corporate showboating are over. We promote merit. You bring results, you get respect. You cut corners, you're gone. A ripple of energy moved through the staff like an electric current. Jordan pulled a folded piece of paper from his inner jacket pocket and unfolded it on the table. A handwritten list. These names, he said, tapping the paper, are people who've been overlooked, underpaid, or underutilized for too long. As of this moment, they're promoted, given new salaries, and full stock options. Effective immediately. Heads turned. One young developer, a shy, bespectacled man named Felix, raised his hand shakily. Sir, I'm on that list. Jordan nodded once. Your automation patch saved the company over $600,000 last quarter. You just didn't know it because your supervisor took the credit. Felix blinked. I live with my mom. Jordan chuckled. Then buy her a house. Laughter filled the room, this time genuine. Nervous at first, then growing. The mood shifted, walls crumbling. Jordan stood. I've also issued a formal memo to the entire company, he said, glancing at Ronan. The assistant tapped his screen, and within seconds, notifications pinged phones across the room. People opened the email. At the top, a bold headline in plain black font. Hardware politics. Effective immediately. Beneath it, a short message written by Jordan himself. To all Nextra staff, this company is no longer built on favors, wine-drenched meetings, or who laughed at whose spouse. It's built on what you bring to the table. Build something that lasts. Make it count, JB. Silence. Then applause. First hesitant, then stronger. Margaret looked overwhelmed but proud. She mouthed, "Thank you," as Jordan nodded once in return. He looked around the room. He saw eyes, real eyes this time. Not masks, not smug sharks, but engineers, analysts, developers, HR assistants. People with ideas, not just ambition. He saw something he hadn't seen in years. Hope. The ripple spread fast. By noon, every floor of Nextra buzzed with transformation. People shared the memo like a war anthem. The toxic ones packed their desks. The quiet ones, the builders, thinkers, coders, were suddenly approached for insight, collaboration, advice. By 3 p.m., new workgroups had formed. Margaret was walking the floor, shaking hands, asking questions no one had ever asked before. I've been working on a redesign for the client dashboard, one intern said nervously. Show me, Margaret replied, smiling. In the PR department, a junior associate was fielding interview requests. They're asking about the memo, she told her manager. They want a quote from the silent owner who rewrote the rules. That's what they're calling him. Across the city, headlines began to surface. Silent billionaire ousts Nextra execs in overnight coup. From trophy husband to corporate overlord. Jordan Cross reshapes tech giant. Meet Margaret Wu, the engineer turned CEO of Nextra. Back on the top floor, Jordan stood at the window of the executive office, not Arthur's old one. He'd given that to Margaret. He stood in a smaller, less flashy room he had repurposed for himself. Quiet, clean, functional. Ronan entered silently, holding a tablet. Updates. Morale has skyrocketed. Internal pulse survey already shows a 65% improvement across departments. Productivity ticked up 11% this morning alone. Stock price up 4.2% and climbing. Jordan nodded slowly. Good. He reached for a framed blueprint on the shelf. The original concept sketch of Orion Systems, drawn on a napkin back in college. He ran a thumb along the edge. All it ever needed was a chance to be real, he muttered. Ronan watched him for a beat, then said, they'll write books about this. Jordan smirked. They should have done their homework. He turned back to the window. Below, the city moved. Nextra hummed with energy. But inside those walls, it was no longer built on snakes in suits and wine-stained arrogance. It was being rebuilt by the underestimated, the unseen, the ones who showed up, stayed late, and never got credit. Now, the rules had changed, and everyone knew it. Chapter 9. Dana's Fallout. Dana sat on the edge of the bed in their master suite, the early morning light spilling weakly through the heavy curtains, casting long, uncertain shadows across the room. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared down at the phone in her lap. 3 missed calls, 2 texts, 1 voicemail, none from Jordan. The silence between the walls of their home had never been so loud. She felt hollow, not just in her chest, but in every part of her that once felt sure, sure of her career, sure of her marriage, sure of herself. Her reflection in the bedroom mirror caught her eye. The woman staring back looked exhausted, disoriented, broken. She wiped a tear that had slipped uninvited down her cheek and finally pressed call on the phone. The line rang twice, then Jordan, his voice came low, distant. "Jordan," she said, voice cracking. "Please, can we talk?" There was a pause. Then, "Okay, 15 minutes." She exhaled sharply, relief mingling with anxiety. 15 minutes was a start. The front door closed behind her quietly as she walked into the living room, where Jordan was already seated on the couch, arms folded, eyes fixed on a blank spot on the wall. Her footsteps hesitated. "Jordan," she began softly. He didn't look at her. I'm sorry. For what I said. For what I did. At the dinner with Travis. I should have defended you." She swallowed hard. "You were right all along. You were the one keeping Nextra afloat. I was blind. I laughed when I should have listened." Jordan's gaze shifted slightly, but he didn't meet her eyes. "You let them laugh," he said quietly. "That told me everything." Dana bit her lip, fighting the lump rising in her throat. "I thought I knew you," she whispered, voice breaking. "I thought I married the man I loved." He finally turned, but his eyes were cold, guarded. "You married a man you thought you knew." She blinked back tears. "What does that mean?" "It means," Jordan said slowly, "that I was invisible to you for years. A shadow in your life. A footnote in your story." She sat down opposite him, hands clasped tightly. "I'm sorry, Jordan. Truly. I don't want to lose you." He leaned back, exhaling sharply. "Right now, I'm not sure if I even want to stay married." The words hit like a punch. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady herself. "Please," she said softly. "I'll take a leave of absence. I need to figure things out. Who I am without all this pretending." Jordan's expression softened, just a fraction. Maybe that's what we both need. The following days were a blur. Dana packed her office belongings with trembling hands. Her team avoided eye contact. Her emails remained unanswered. Rumors circulated. She tried to be strong, but inside, she felt like she was crumbling. Each morning, she woke up questioning everything. Who was she, if not Nextra's rising star? Who was she, if the man she married was the true power behind the empire? She spent long nights staring at their bedroom door, listening to the faint sound of Jordan's restless breathing from the other room. He had moved out of their shared bed. Sleeping separately was a quiet admission of distance too vast to bridge in one night. One evening, as rain pattered softly against the window, Dana found herself standing by the kitchen sink, gripping a glass of water like a lifeline. Jordan entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of herbal tea. He set one down in front of her. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. They sat in silence, the weight between them filling the space. Finally, she spoke. "Do you ever think about what went wrong? How do we get here?" He stared into his mug. "Years of silence. Years of me stepping back so you could shine. Years of you seeing what you wanted and ignoring what was true." She nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to ignore you, Jordan. I know." Another pause. "I want to be better, if you'll let me." He looked at her, the faintest hint of warmth flickering in his eyes. "Actions, Dana, not words." She swallowed the lump and nodded. The following week, Dana left the house for work less and less. Finally, she called HR and submitted a formal request for a leave of absence. Her world felt shattered, yet strangely empty, a blank slate she didn't know how to fill. She spent her days walking through quiet parks, sitting in cafes, trying to find the pieces of herself that had been buried beneath ambition, pride, and denial. At night, the house was cold. Jordan slept in the guest room. They no longer shared whispered conversations or touches that once sparked fires. The gulf between them felt cavernous. Dana lay awake more nights than not, staring at the ceiling, the reality sinking deeper. She had married a king, but treated him like a servant. And now, the crown was heavy on both their heads. Chapter 10. The Legacy. Weeks passed like a swift current, carrying Nextra forward on a tide of renewed energy and promise. The once stifling corridors that had echoed with whispered politics and hollow laughter now buzzed with purposeful conversations. The hum of creativity and the rapid clatter of keyboards from teams energized by clear direction and real opportunity. Jordan stood on the balcony of Nexra's newly renovated executive wing, overlooking the sprawling campus below. The city skyline stretched beyond, glistening under the afternoon sun like a vast network of ambitions waiting to be realized. Beside him, Margaret Wu, the newly appointed CEO, was deep in discussion with a group of engineers. They had just returned from a demo of a breakthrough software update designed to slash processing times by nearly half. Jordan watched them with a quiet smile, hands folded behind his back. "This is the beginning of something real," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. Margaret turned, catching his gaze. "Thanks to you, Jordan." He shook his head, humility brief but genuine. "Thanks to all of us." It was time for merit to lead the way. Politics and games only hold back progress. Her eyes sparkled with determination. "And it's not just about the company anymore, is it?" Jordan's face grew serious. "No, it's about creating a future where talent isn't stifled by circumstance, where a kid from anywhere can learn to code, to innovate, to build." That very vision had been germinating since the upheaval. Jordan had spent countless late nights drafting plans and making calls, driven by a purpose far beyond profits. Now, the fruits of those efforts were blossoming. He had launched the Orion Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing underprivileged youth with access to technology education, mentorship, and career pathways in STEM fields. Their pilot program was already active in several underfunded schools across the city. Today was the official announcement. The press conference was held in Nexra's bright atrium, flooded with natural light. Jordan stepped up to the podium, his usual calm replaced by a flicker of passion. Microphones clicked on, cameras focused, and a sea of reporters leaned forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jordan began, voice steady and confident, "we live in a world where technology shapes our everyday. But far too many young minds are left behind, unable to access the tools and education needed to succeed." He paused, letting the weight of the statement settle. "That's why today, Nexra and Orion Systems are proud to launch the Orion Foundation, dedicated to breaking down those barriers." Behind him, a large screen flickered on, displaying images of smiling students coding, mentors guiding workshops, and futuristic labs buzzing with activity. Jordan smiled, the warmth genuine. This foundation will provide scholarships, hands-on training, internships, and mentorship programs designed to unlock potential wherever it exists, no matter background, race, or economic status. Questions came fast and sharp. "Mr. Cross, why the focus on youth programs?" Jordan answered without hesitation. "I believe the future belongs to those who build it. Investing in young talent isn't just philanthropy, it's an investment in innovation, community, and the long-term health of our industry." Another reporter pushed further. "Your identity as the majority owner of Nexra was a closely guarded secret until recently. Has revealing yourself changed how the industry views you?" Jordan chuckled lightly. "It's interesting how perceptions shift when the truth comes to light. For years, I was the invisible husband, the silent partner, the trophy spouse. Now, I'm simply a man who believes actions speak louder than titles." There was a murmur of approval. A younger journalist asked, "What's next for you, Jordan?" He thought for a moment. "More work, more programs, and continuing to push companies like Nexra to remember that leadership means lifting others up, not just climbing higher." After the press conference, as the crowd dispersed, Jordan was approached by a familiar voice. "Mr. Cross." It was Diane Caldwell, the editor of Tech Innovator magazine. "I want to feature you in our next cover story," she said with a warm smile. "Your story, it's inspiring. From shadow to spotlight." Jordan nodded. "I'd like that." Over the following weeks, Jordan's presence in the tech world grew undeniable. He was invited to keynote conferences, where his speeches blended sharp insights with personal anecdotes about resilience, vision, and integrity. Podcasts sought his voice, his calm authority cutting through the noise of flashy trends and hollow buzzwords. Executives who had once sneered now reached out with tentative respect. Even Dana, from a distance, followed his rise, the distance between them bridged by the silent weight of what could have been. One evening, Jordan sat with Margaret in Nextra's conference room, reviewing upcoming initiatives. "You've become a legend in just a few months," she said, half teasing. He smiled softly. "Not a legend, just a man finally free to do the work that matters." Margaret shook her head. "The industry's watching. They're learning from you. And that's exactly why I'm not hiding anymore." He tapped a framed photo on his desk, an old college snapshot of himself and his small team, brainstorming late into the night. "We started Orion Systems in a dorm room, fueled by late-night caffeine and big dreams," Jordan said. "I never expected to own a giant like Nextra one day." Margaret looked thoughtful. "And yet here we are, the silent owner, the visionary behind the merger, finally stepping into the light." Jordan leaned back, eyes distant but steady. "It's not about recognition. It's about legacy." He stood and walked to the window. "Legacy is about what you build, who you help, the doors you open." The city lights flickered on as dusk settled. Jordan's silhouette was framed by glass and steel, the quiet architect of a new era. The man who had once been mocked as a loser was now the voice everyone listened to. The owner of 90% of Nextra, the founder of the Orion Foundation, a respected leader who rewrote the rules. His identity was no longer hidden behind silence or shadows. It was a beacon. Chapter 11. Full Circle. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel was dazzling, chandeliers spilling crystal light over the sea of elegant gowns and tailored suits, a glittering tapestry of power and prestige. But tonight, the energy was different. Gone was the usual air of smug competition and whisper gossip. Instead, the room buzzed with genuine anticipation, a collective hum of respect that rippled through every corner. Jordan stepped into the entrance, a sharp contrast to the hesitant figure he had been months ago. His posture was relaxed but commanding. The tailored black tuxedo fit him perfectly, a subtle nod to the quiet power he now wielded. The staff recognized him immediately, eyes lighting up as he passed. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That's him, the man who saved Nextra, the real boss." He smiled slightly, nodding politely to familiar faces, engineers, analysts, administrative assistants, those who had once been overlooked but were now the heartbeat of the company. From across the room, Dana stood near the back, her evening dress elegant but understated. She kept to herself, the glow of the room doing little to lift the weight in her eyes. She watched Jordan move through the crowd with the quiet assurance of a man who had found his throne, not by force or volume, but by sheer presence. The event was about celebrating Nextra's milestone year, but the highlight of the evening was the announcement of the CEO's Award for Visionary Leadership, a prize voted on by employees, shareholders, and industry peers. Jordan was the unanimous choice. When his name was called, the applause was immediate and thunderous. He made his way to the stage with calm dignity, the crowd rising to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted nearly a full minute. Dana clapped quietly from her seat near the back, her gaze fixed on the man she once underestimated. Jordan adjusted the microphone, the room settling into expectant silence. He took a breath, then began. "Thank you." His voice was steady, rich with the weight of hard-won experience. "When I first walked into Nextra, I was invisible, a shadow in the boardroom, a name no one knew. I was the loser husband, the silent partner, the man others mocked." He paused, scanning the faces before him, not with anger, but with resolve. But here's the truth. Sometimes the loudest person in the room isn't the strongest. Sometimes they're the weakest. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Jordan's eyes glinted with quiet fire. "I didn't come here to shout or fight. I came to build, to listen, to earn respect not by volume, but by results." The audience leaned in, hanging on his every word. He continued, voice steady but passionate. "Power isn't about dominance or intimidation. It's about patience, persistence, and the ability to create something that lasts. Jordan's gaze flicked to Dana, her eyes glistening with tears she fought to hide. "In respect," he said softly. "Respect is earned. It's not given away lightly." The room was silent now, the weight of his message sinking deep. He smiled, a slow, confident smile. "So, to those who laughed when I was quiet, to those who doubted when I stayed calm, I thank you. Because while you were busy laughing, I was building empires. A beat. Sometimes the loudest in a room is the weakest. I prefer to build empires while they laugh." The crowd erupted again, this time louder, more heartfelt. Hands clapped until they ached. Voices cheered. Jordan stepped down, shaking hands, exchanging nods. Margaret approached, beaming. "You were incredible up there." Jordan nodded. "It's not about me. It's about all of us." Dana lingered near the exit, waiting until the crowd thinned. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a mixture of regret, respect, and unresolved history. She finally whispered, "You changed everything." Jordan's answer was quiet but sure. "Sometimes, the man you think you know isn't the man you needed to see." And with that, the gala came full circle. The man once mocked was now the man who commanded the room. The empire stood tall, and the laughter had long since turned to applause.